So we wrapped the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearings, and it's looking as though she is going to be confirmed as the first black woman on the Supreme Court. Let's keep in mind the Supreme Court is not a position that progressives were ever going to benefit from very well. It is essentially existent there to maintain power structures within the law, and those power structures are not progressive in the slightest, and the left is way too far back on the game to really repair that anytime in the next several decades. I don't mean to be alarmist, but I mean, like, that's the truth. The court leans conservative. All the federal judges on the federal benches lean conservative. Even the ones who are liberal and kind of left-leaning lean conservative. This was supposed to be like a left-leaning progressive, judge pick because she was a public defender. So like someone who defends, potential criminals or people who are being charged with things. It's supposed to be like the pillar of our justice system, that everyone's entitled to a judge, even the worst among us. And so the idea that you have someone like that rise into the Supreme Court is supposed to be like one of those leftist things, and she's still kind of conservative. So let's not get our hopes up too much for that, although it is a good moment to see this kind of representation on the court, because it'll mean that American experience will start to factor in the application of this law and the direction of where the law can go, because the court can say the law hasn't figured this out, which is sort of a cue to Congress to pass a law. But these hearings are nothing but political performance, and Republicans are the only ones that were doing most of the performing. That means not only was it a sick show, but there's barely any alternative forcefully rebuking the torrents and distractions that Republicans are offering you. And so I think it's important to analyze these videos from the hearing. They're mostly Republican lines of questioning, and look at the patterns, because I think we can see where the Republicans are going to start to head with their criticisms in the next couple of years when they're campaigning against Democrats. So Lindsey Graham really did a good job setting the tone by storming off, essentially, and finding a way to make this about, you guessed it, Kavanaugh. It's like a distraction that has nothing to do with this. There's no reason one judge have to answer for another judge's approval process, but Ketanji Brown Jackson is put in this position. So let's review this.
So you're the beneficiary of a lie. You're the beneficiary of Republican nominees having their life turned upside down. And it didn't work. So I'm hoping that we can have a hearing that's respectful, that's informative, that's challenging. And President Biden has every right to pick who he'd like to pick. That comes with winning the White House. And I've been very inclined to support the picks of people that I would not have chosen. But this is a new game for the Supreme Court.
So there, he's going on this rambling tirade about how, okay, we're going to take the high ground because the Kavanaugh hearing was such a low ground. As though punting one of Obama's Supreme Court picks until after an election where he was replaced by Republicans so you can get an extra Supreme Court pick wasn't the low ground. You can go back and forth on this, really. Like, it's completely dumb, but the GOP is playing a different game, and the Democrats are asleep at the wheel for that game. And so Lindsey Graham melted off and stormed off multiple times during the Ketanji Brown Jackson hearing. Nearly twice. It was so performative. These were meant for like Fox News moments. But there are moments where they're, testing the waters on critical race theory and figuring out how they could get Ketanji Brown Jackson on that. And so here is Corbyn trying to get her on that.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not arguing the merits or lack of merits of same-sex marriage. I believe the states and the voters can choose what they will, and that's their prerogative, and I think that's legitimate. But when the court overrules the decisions made by the people, as they did in 32 of the 35 states that decided to recognize only traditional marriage between a man and a woman, That is a act of judicial policymaking, is it not?
Senator, the Supreme Court has considered that to be an application of the substantive due process clause of the 14th Amendment.
Well, one of the things that concerns me is here is an example of the courts finding a new fundamental right that is mentioned nowhere in the document of the Constitution. That's the product of simply court-made law that we're all supposed to salute smartly and follow, because 9 people who are unelected, who have lifetime tenure, whose salary cannot be reduced while they serve in office, they decide, 5 of them decide that this is the way the world should be.
And never mind that Congress people are the ones that make the laws. It's supposed to be the judges that interpret them. And never mind that's all a facade, because these judges have liberal slants and conservative slants of interpreting these laws. There's a ton of things that weren't in the Constitution originally. And there's a ton of things that were allowed in the Constitution originally. The reason that the Constitution, most, modern democratic documents, or attempting to be democratic documents such as it, are rebels, because those things can be changed. In fact, Americans have done a really bad job at changing the Constitution. We haven't made a change in this Constitution in several generations. But the previous iteration of the Constitution wouldn't have allowed Ketanji and Brown Jackson to vote. It would have made it very hard for her to be a Supreme Court judge, let alone make it past one of the tests it would have taken to purposely weed out people of color who would have been lynched if they tried to get an education to try to pass that test. Needless to say, the Constitution's changed a little bit. The Constitution was changed to adjust the drinking age and then adjusted back. So you can do a lot of these constitutional originalists are ridiculous, because originally in the Constitution it was made so you could change it and update it. Nevertheless, Ted Cruz is going to get his stupid on, because what else would he do? And of course, he's going to bring on his favorite bugaboo, some shit about cancel culture.
Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram Kendi. And there are portions of this book that I find really quite remarkable. One portion of the book says babies are taught to be racist or anti-racist. There is no neutrality. Another portion of the book, they recommend to babies confess when being racist. Now, this is a book that is taught at Georgetown Day School to students in pre-K through 2nd grade, so 4 through 7 years old. Do you agree with this book that is being taught with kids that babies are racist?
I do not believe that any child should be made to feel as though they are racist, or though they are not valued, or though they are less than, that they are victims, that they are oppressors. I don't believe in any of that. But what I will say is that when you asked me whether or not this was taught in schools, critical race theory, my understanding is that critical race theory as an academic theory is taught in law schools. And to the extent that you were asking the question, I understood you to be addressing public schools. Georgetown Day School, just like the religious school that Justice Barrett was on the board of, is a private school.
Okay, so you agree critical race theory is taught at Georgetown Day School?
I don't know, because the board is not, the board does not control the curriculum.
Oh my God, Ted Cruz was trying. Private schools can do what they want to. They can assign whatever curriculum they want to. Or whether she agrees with it or not. Whether you agree with the curriculum or not, it's a free country. Especially in a private school, if you don't like it, leave it. Go to a different school. Free market, free choice. This is the stuff that Ted Cruz pretends to be a fan of when it fits his ideology, but tries to weasel around when it doesn't. And ultimately, at the end of the day, she's on the board. She doesn't decide the curriculum. That's left up to the teachers. So It's another failure from Ted Cruz. But again, this is an attempt. The right wing is going to use this as a thing to spin in the media by saying, oh no, one of the judges in the Supreme Court is a follower of critical race theory. Boo, scary. You have Lindsey Graham also picking into the race baiting, and that's what this ultimately is. These are questions that are meant to kind of point out that Ketanji Brown is blackety black, and that's supposed to scare the audience of Fox News.
Every group that wants to pack the court, that believes this court is a bunch of right-wing nuts that are going to destroy America, that consider the Constitution trash, all wanted you picked. And this is all I can say, is the fact that so many of these left-wing radical groups that would destroy the law as we know it declared war on Michelle Childs and supported you is problematic for me.
So it's guilt by association. Keep in mind, if you're actually on the left, you don't, yeah, I mean, like, you're almost with Lindsey Graham, like, you don't like the idea of the Supreme Court. You, like, think the Constitution is trash, etc. Sure, thanks for playing, right? But then the left didn't have a Supreme Court pick. Like, this was fine. This was, like, better than, obviously, a right-winger, but it's self-defeatist. It's only meant to play to a Fox News audience. It was important to remember that doing a lot of these hearings. Marsha Blackburn goes in for her little bit of Constitution baiting as well.
So you agree that the Constitution does not mention the right to an abortion, and yet, through one of the most brazen acts of judicial activism, our Supreme Court created the right through Roe v. Wade. This is why Americans, this is why so many women that I've talked to are really concerned about who sits on the federal bench.
Again, much like the thing with Corbyn, this is the Constitution that you can change should you want it to. And also the Supreme Court, it's up to their interpretation of the laws that exist. So if these congresspeople don't like the laws, they can change them. That'll put them in the position of answering to their constituents why they want to take away their abortion rights from them. Ball would be in their court in that case. And this next clip really made the rounds because this goes into their anti-trans battle, which goes into their war on pedophiles and child predators. So they're trying to loop in the LGBTQ community with this QAnon fear and then say that, oh, these pedophiles are the ones who kept Trump out of office. So make sure you vote for Trump again. It's really deep. It's really weird, but that's what they're really laying the groundwork for. And they're doing it at the level of the Supreme Court, which is scary for the way they're going to try to use the Republican base to attack our institutions. Like, this is World War II Germany stuff.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in
Okay.
this context.
So
I'm not a
the
biologist.
meaning of the word woman is so unclear and controversial that you can't give me a definition?
Senator, in my work as a judge, what I do is I address disputes. If there's a dispute about a definition, people make arguments, and I look at the law and I decide. So I'm not.
The fact that you can't give me a straight answer about something as fundamental as what a woman is underscores the dangers of the kind of progressive education that we are hearing about. Just last week, an entire generation of young girls watched as our taxpayer-funded institutions permitted a biological man to compete and beat a biological woman in the NCAA swimming championships. What message do you think this sends to girls who aspire to compete and win in sports at the highest levels?
Senator, I'm not sure what message that sends. If you're asking me about the legal issues related to it, those are topics that are being hotly discussed, as you say, and could come to the court.
So the Republicans got what they wanted from that, which is the lawyer's not going to fall for your game of culture war issues of what is a woman, because if you don't answer the way they want you to, which is a woman is this rigid example of a person who stays and cooks and cleans all the time and keeps for the family, then you will be scrutinized by massive parts of the Republican Party. And judges are supposed to be above this like culture war nonsense. In the reality, in the way they practice, no, they're not. But they're supposed to be a cut above that, at least in theory. And so, what do you get as this end result here? Is trying to tie this judge to a caricature of a movement that is seen as taking away trophies from people training in sports, which is barely happening. Like, I think someone mentioned however many tournaments there are in college sports and high school sports, and however many versus how many trans athletes there are versus how many are like in the top echelons. You're talking about overturning a policy because you're upset about like 3 people. It's insane, but it's not because, I mean, yes, because they hate those 3 people and the many more people who are trans in this country, but because there's way more than 3 people that they can propagandize to, and they can weaponize their fear and distrust of things that are changing into anti-partisanship against the Democratic Party. And so I have one more clip because this is where it gets to be the most insidious, because it's a direct tie into QAnon behavior.
We're talking about 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds and 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds. He's got images of these, the government said added up to over 600 images, gobs of video footage of these children, but you say this does not signal a heinous or egregious child pornography offense. Help me understand that. What word would you use if it's not heinous or egregious? How would you describe it?
There was Josh Hawley, complete Republican clown, trying to hammer home the idea that Ketanji Brown Jackson was too light on a sentencing of someone who had distributed perverse graphic images of children. This person got sentenced. The idea of like how many more years they got is within like the requirements, so to speak, of the Fed. It wasn't like Ketanji Brown Jackson went to the absolute minimum, but like going to the absolute maximum, what more does, like, you have to get down to like what more does adding more years solve other than like making you feel better necessarily, right? And what she's saying, like, and what she said in other clips is that Ketanji Brown Jackson, what Ketanji Brown Jackson was saying in other parts of that whole hearing, went on multiple hours long, is that, look, she followed the procedures for how you rule on these things, and you can choose to be overly punitive. You can choose to think about what is the best for rehabilitation. And I, Dan, honestly don't think that our penal system is any form of rehabilitation can possibly provide that. But if Ketanji Brown Jackson thinks that the lower end of rehabilitation helps with that, especially because this person was, around the age of 18 or 19 when that happened, then maybe that's a consideration that the judge makes. Maybe that's a consideration for how the law looks at these cases and what's required as a mandatory minimum, quote unquote. But that's a debate that Josh Hawley can have as a congressperson, as a lawmaker. This is a judge. But this is all combining into a QAnon moment for the right wing, because they're going to use the energy from that to fearmonger and try to paint the Democrats as, yes, seriously, aligned with child molesters. It's sick, it's gross, but it's par for the course for the Republican Party now.